I've watched many of the Marvel movies, and when I watch them, I do it the way they were meant to be watched. On a 10-inch screen on the back of a chair in a Delta Airbus A320 using $2 earbuds. I'm kind of a cinema purist that way. Marvel movies are fun, no doubt. I like CGI fight sequences and high concept origin stories. I like the good and evil binary. All that stuff is fine, good times. But when the MCU gets it most right, which is not all the time, but it's when it delves into the gray areas, not just the black and white. The first 2/3 of WandaVision is about grief. It's about what someone will do to avoid facing despair. Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man has been the centerpiece of these types of questions in the MCU of what it means to amass weaponry and power. Superhero stories, for my money, are at their best when the heroes struggle with themselves or the others in their group rather than with a greater externalized threat. So sure, Doctor Doom or Thanos or Doc Ock has gone crazy and wants to wield all the power, but it's way more interesting when characters like Magneto or Loki show up, agents of chaos who aren't necessarily power hungry nor mad. They're simply difficult fucking people who make life harder for our perceived protagonists. All of this basic superhero stuff in the MCU all of this is basic superhero stuff, and the MCU mostly does a fun job with it. Listen, I'm no expert on this stuff. I just occasionally enjoy the cinematic majesty of an in-flight blockbuster. My mind immediately went to the superhero genre while watching 1996's classic The Craft, a movie about 4 teenage girls who are all outsiders in some way, who form a coven. They discover they have real powers as a circle of 4, and ultimately it's about what they do with that power that matters. There are external villains, a racist mean girl, an abusive stepfather, a date rapist dickhead, but the real conflict is internal. How do you deal with conflict? What are the consequences of violence, greed, lust, and vanity? And the biggest question I think this film asks is, who gets to decide what anyone deserves? Hi, Cecil.
Hi, Jeffrey.
Cecil, you are a literal superhero. What is your power, and describe your costume to me, more importantly?
Okay. My name would be the Cunning Linguist.
Okay.
And I would have the ability to understand at a single word. If somebody spoke a single word to me, I would be able to understand and speak fluently that entire language, to extrapolate, to understand that, like, terrestrial and extraterrestrial. And what does my costume look like?
Yeah.
I think brown tweed suit with like a nice little, very like, I'd be known for like my bow ties and like scarves and like something gay and kind of magic or something like that.
Oh, I like it. Yeah, I'm sort of imagining.
Like, do you need a translator to talk to these, and we can see how far we take it, to talk to these tree ants? And that would be me. I'd be like, they just said they don't want to leave.
Wait, are you an elm? You sound just like one.
Did I sound like your grandma's elm?
Yeah. I never really thought about costumes at all, other than I don't know. I like the way you're going, which is a more like natural costume, like it's heightening the sense of academia, like a tweedy sort of jacket. Colin Firth could play this character if you were unavailable.
Yeah, like it's more Indiana Jones superhero rather than like Magneto superhero.
I always thought, like, I was kind of drawn to, I think my favorite character was Rogue growing up, but Rogue seems like a really complex that's a complex superpower because it takes a lot of fucking shit out of you to use it. But I do like just your classic strongman. I think I would be like the lumberjack, where I just like wear flannel and I have a giant like magical axe that I can like destroy things with. Nice. And I have a sidekick like Ox or something. I think that would be fun. But it's like the size of a dog. I think it's really cute.
It's not a giant ox. It's more
no. It's a tiny little ox.
A tiny ox.
So Cecil, we again do not have a guest this week. We have an author, we have a podcaster, we have a video game historian, a dear friend, and the WTF laureate of Random Horror 9. We have Sarah Griffin. Hi, Sarah.
Oh, hi, Jeffrey. Hi, Cecil. Thank you so much for having me back, boys. I'm so excited to be here again. I'm thrilled to have been called back in to talk the deeply weird with you once more. I am buzzing.
We shined the Griff light into the sky because we were watching a witch movie.
Oh yeah,
I crawled out of the wallpaper.
No.
Sarah, what's on your like if it's not a bat, but what's on the Griff signal? What is your
my
emblem?
goodness, my emblem is Oh, that's a it's like an anatomically correct eyeball, veins and all.
Oh,
You know, a detailed
yeah.
one. It requires some
Yeah.
elaborate shadow puppetry, but you know, it's right up there in the sky, right next to the moon, but it casts around like a horrible little eyeball.
I like that it looks
Yes.
around. It's an animated GIF
Yeah.
of a thing.
Where's
Yeah.
she at? Where's
It's
she
a
at?
gif of a gif.
It's a
It's a
GIF of
gif
a
of a
GIF.
griff.
Yeah, she's under your fridge. She's under your fridge.
It's an animated
She's behind your
GIF.
tap.
Animated
Yes.
GIF.
Oh, yeah, it's just me up there with my cat and my dog standing in the sky waiting,
You're just shining a light into the sky. You're
you
like,
know.
Arda,
Oh,
somebody talk to me.
and disappear. Who's wearing a bad wig? Come on. Like I can see them from up here.
Oh, it's brilliant.
So I know the answer to this was Cecil because I asked him last week, and it seems obvious from the get-go that Cecil has already seen The Craft before. Have you seen The Craft before, Sarah?
I have, but I don't think I saw it early enough in my life. I saw it in my 20s, and I feel like if I had seen this in my teens, it would have made me worse than I was in unknowable ways. So I have seen it a couple of times, but revisiting it again with a sort of a notebook and pen ready to study it was so satisfying and so fulfilling. Because having watched it as a young woman, I was like, there's so many things on the surface of it that tick all the pleasant boxes, you know, complicated intra friend group dynamics among women, terrible lads who are who you want to pay attention to you but are also very frightening, great
Oh,
clothes, you know.
yeah.
On the skin of this film, the skin of this film is what I remember the most clearly from having seen it a couple of times, but then having gone back into it today, I got it. There's so much more in there to offer. It's such a neat, crisp piece of cinema. There's not a loose thread really until we get to the sort of the latter end, but largely it's such a clear and gorgeous film.
Yeah, it really is. I went into this, I'd never seen this movie before. I remember this movie coming out, but it's one of these movies that landed, you know, especially earlier in your life, you have little blind spots, you know, as you get into your 30s and 40s, a couple of years doesn't make a difference, you know, to anything. But this movie came out like while I was in my junior, senior year of college. And so there's a thing where it just sort of, one wasn't seeing a ton of movies then, and then and if I was, it was for class, so I'm watching fucking Citizen Kane or some shit like that. And it also just feels when you're 21 years old, this feels a little younger than you when
Yeah,
it
it is a
comes out.
teen girl movie. Like it
Yeah.
is for teens.
Yeah.
And then you watch it again as adult and you can see how much consideration there is into it. But again, on that skin level, on that first viewing level, it's a movie about teen girls having teen girl situations and experiences. The adult experience of watching it is to look at the narrative and cinematography and all that good all the good stuff becomes clearer. But yeah, no one is like there's definitely a wrong time in your life to see this if there is a right time in your life to see it.
Yeah.
I got it at the exact right time. Like this movie came out my junior year of high school. Like I was the age, you know, which is such an interesting thing because so I was like, okay, what's the date? 1996. Here we go. And I sometimes do like a pull up of like, you know, news and pop culture of the year. And I was like, just taken back. I was like, oh, Clinton's re-election year. Bob Dole, Ross Perot, Newt Gingrich, like all that is very present in this movie for me because it's interesting you use the word blind spot of like I feel like I was coming up of this generation that this is everything that this movie has, my generation had, and everything that this movie missed, my generation missed.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think the politics of the time are really interesting because one of the conversations being had in the latter part of the 90s, especially in America, but I think across the world, it was the question about America, which is, are you the cops? You know, do you need to be cops of the world?
Are you world cop?
And I do think this movie deals with that on a like teen girls fighting with each other sort of way, because it asks the question quite a bit as to like what is good, what is evil. And as we will talk about with the witch shop owner, those are human constructs. That's not nature's decision to make anything good or evil. It's entirely on you to decide what that is. And then is it your responsibility to take that power? And then the question at the end that I have with Sarah, which we'll get to, is are you the cop now?
I think in any social dynamic, especially having gone to a all girls school as a teenager, and
Oh
all
yeah.
girls Catholic school, and having been taught by nuns, so I thoroughly enjoyed all the sequences in the school, as we'll talk about later. A little flinchy, but I really enjoy them all the same.
You're like, shake it off,
Woo!
shake it off.
The stand-up walker in the room, but I think that having experienced this, and I can say it with no shame, and it's something that I'm acutely sensitive to in my adult life, and will often say to friends of mine, everyone is a couple of bad days off becoming a cop to your friends.
Yeah.
And especially as teenage girls, we were all cops to each other. We were all trying to find ways to control one another because we couldn't control literally anything else. And that's one thing with teenagers who are just sort of amorphous balls of energy and hormones. And, I remember so well from those years thinking I had everything together while having absolutely nothing together at all. But that policing of each other and that intrasocial like cop behavior is so relatable. You have to, like, ACAB means the cop in your head. It means the cops in your social group. That is the greatest challenge of adult life, I think, is trying to work out how not to be a cop to the people you care about, and these girls are deep in trying to police one another and their friends. A lot of this story is about power and how it is, who has it, who hasn't got it, and how do they take it. I think that's a real nexus point,
Power to the powerless seemed to be like the theme of their social circle, but also like, but in a weird way, like that's in the story, but then also looking at the story of the movie and the time that it was made, and especially, like seeing what these career actors have done since then, and like, knowing that it's a lot. Like this movie is knowing that 3 years later, Charmed would come out, and it would be the hallmark. Like this movie made the mold that would then later be stamped out 200,000 times in a like male dominated Hollywood that was just like, women's stories. This is women's stories. It's girls doing witchcraft. So it's got to have an R rating. And then they made the facsimile of the facsimile of the facsimile. And that idea of like power to the powerless, especially when it comes to the women making this movie, seems thin,
And the aesthetic of it is, so you're dead right that it leads the way for Charmed, but like it's also of this sort of oeuvre of girl witch television and girl witch cinema. Like Practical Magic is a film that I'm reading the book at the moment. I've been thinking about it a lot recently. There's a real look and a real aesthetic, like deliberate chosen 90s girl witch thing that I think is having a huge resurgence at the moment as well. It's having its moment again via Instagram and TikTok. Gen Z are really taking to this particular kind of fashion and this particular kind of way. So not only does it have an interesting relationship with the world around it at its time, it also has a really interesting legacy as well.
Oh yeah.
Like it's got a real it had a real weird lasting imprint,
It also feels like
a quick question. Has anybody seen a quick question. Has anybody seen The Craft Legacy, the one that came out like 2 years ago?
No,
I didn't see it either. No,
I'm sort of afraid of very late sequels myself. I have a little bit of a like, no, leave them where they were. Like, feeling across cinema, across television. Like, I don't really want to know what Fraser Crane is doing right now, and I wish television would stop trying to invite that into my life. I don't want to know, So I think for me, I will not be doing late sequels. I don't.
Okay, agreed. We are agreed across the board.
Yeah.
I was going to say this movie is a really wonderful time capsule of the mid-90s as well, in terms of fashion.
Fashion, music.
High schoolers smoking is a real thing in 80s, 90s. I feel like it went harder in the 90s than it did in the 80s. I notice it more in 90s movies too. Yeah, it's great, and also with this particular cast, especially when you talk about Fairuza Balk and Nev Campbell, both feel kind of at the height of this mid-90s thing. So I think this movie came out the same year as the original Scream, and here we are with Skeet Ulrich playing total a-hole boyfriend, and Nev Campbell kind of
and Nev Campbell, both this film and Nev Campbell herself does a pretty good job for the first movement of this film, convincing us that she's awkward and gawky and kind of,
I'm not
deep in her
beautiful.
unattractiveness.
Well,
and then
she's just quiet.
Pulls
She's just
back her hair
she's quiet and bookish. That's her whole thing. Which is
normal.
like the smartest thing you could do as an actor. Just be like, oh, like just fade into the background, and she has that voice that just like she's like a wounded baby bird that you're like, oh, I must love you, and then knowing full well, like she's so smart in that choice.
Yeah. I enjoy this so much because they're like, ooh, this girl's gross because she's covered in burns, of which you cannot see at any point in time, even if that's gross.
Nev, cry me a river, babe. You're perfectly symmetrical. Like, come on.
Yeah.
And then one day she doesn't wear her giant puffy jacket over her shirt, and all the boys are like, oh, that girl's pretty.
She has boobs.
She brushed her hair. Lo and behold, the hair was doing a lot of work for her in that illusion briefly. But God, she's fantastic, and even the soundtrack is full of like bands that you like. What are they called? Cleo. I'm gonna
right
from the tip of my tongue. They did the music for loads of other cinema at the time. I'm gonna look that up and bring that back up later because it's Letters to Cleo.
Yes.
That's it.
God,
Letters to Cleo are full of this because I watched it with subtitles on to make sure I didn't a word.
That was it.
And it noted every band's name that came up on the screen.
Hell yes.
Letters to Cleo, are you kidding me?
This fucking movie starts with, we get the witch table and we hear "This is the hour, ours is the power," chanting candles, tentacles, candles and pentacles, and then it immediately goes into the title sequence playing Sister Hazel. So 90s. I love it.
Sister Hazel. And Sarah, it's so funny you mentioned like kind of the 2020. Wait, we're in 2023. Yes, 2023.
No, we're not. The time is frozen.
I was like,
we
what?
really aren't.
Oh, Jesus. Like this immediately I was like, oh yeah, this is still a pretty, like, lots of, it's the more is more, the aesthetic is more aspect of magic that people like relate to. It's just like, yes, here's some hematite, it's grounding, like that kind of, is it pretty, put it on there. Does it have a meaning? Look it up in a book.
With e-commerce so well. The Gen Z kids call the look that these girls are doing the non-goth. There's sort of an intermediate fashion that isn't quite goth, that's something else. They call it whimsigoth, which is this softer, lacier, more floral, but also still distinctively goth. And I think the trappings of that world, the table that we see from the offset is full of these objects that are, they feel charmed, they feel magical, they feel special. And those would not be out of place in a teenager's bedroom today or in an adult's bedroom today. They're just laid out a little bit more like they're in Anthropology than they are in kind of a crystal shop, So it's amazing how this first sequence really could be today. It could be.
Yeah. So we set up that we've got Sarah is moving from San Francisco to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And she is coming to this brand new school, and she is going to meet these other three girls along with some real douche boys, some absolute fuckwits in this class too. But we get set up pretty early that as Sarah is sitting in the back of French class, she's doing the thing where she's got superpowers, but over very mundane things, where she's able to just stand her pencil up on a point and it just stays there with her mind. I love this sequence too, because we have the other three girls, Bonnie, Nancy, and Rochelle. We've already set up early on that they're witches. They have their little coven of three, but they're talking about, we need a fourth. We need the 4 points of this compass. 4 is a circle, whereas 3 is not. I mean, it depends. I mean, 3 is how you draw that circle. Yeah. Depends on how you draw the circle.
Close enough, it might be. They're obviously not teaching them very well at this school, but I understand where they're coming from. Maybe they don't have a shapes class. I'm not great at animals. You don't have to be great at shapes.
Listen,
that's fine.
I want to say, who the bad guy is in this movie? The American education system.
Yes, absolutely. Honestly, are nuns there teaching them that there are 4 points in a circle? Because
they're like, geometry failed. All of you. But here's the thing, is like, you talk about the fuckwit boys, and I was just like, these boys, like, where are the teachers in this film? Where are the teachers? Where are the parents?
Where are the adults?
Yes.
Where are
Where
the
are
teachers?
the
Where are the
adults?
which is a common horror movie thing. Like Nancy's, Nancy's mom and dad kind of disappear in Nightmare on Elm Street until they come in and reveal all the backstory.
Mm.
But that's like, we never get any kind of guidance from any adult, even from witchy woo-woo magic store lady. All she
Gwyneth
does is just
Paltrow
like,
in the magic shop.
yeah, all Gwyneth Paltrow in the magic shop does is just like spray some like blue sage mist and be like,
Oh,
good
God.
luck.
Oh, with God, children. See you later.
Good luck, kids.
Can't help
Because
you.
I want no part of this. So like,
Yeah, I think
I was like, so many times I was watching Breckenmeyer or like
Skeet Ulrich and
Skeet Ulrich or racist Laura Lizzie and the diving board. And I was like, what is that diving teacher doing right now? Like, but that to me was like, the faults in this movie I saw were much more the faults of the 90s, that sort of like what is the American education system? And it's lackadaisical. It was a boom time, so we're just like, we're doing good. We're the cops of the world. Everything's working perfectly.
it's also left over from, I think, the 80s, whereas Cecil, you and I were in high school in the 90s. And I think by this time, not to say that bullying didn't exist at this point or doesn't still exist, but the intensity of the bullying, I think, may have been from an earlier time. Do you know what I mean? I think this may be a residue from just the blatant overall bullying. I mean, it still exists in Jennifer's Body, which is like 2009. That's 13 years after this movie.
Yeah.
I came of age in the sort of the 2000s, that sort of 2002 upwards age. I would argue that maybe people were kind of meaner. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's a cruelty in cinema from that time and in the way teenagers are depicted as talking in the sort of 2004 upwards, and even in television. When I revisit TV from that time, I'm like, ow, this is kind of mean. It feels different. So I think there's a sharpness to things like Jennifer's Body that don't really exist here. The bullying doesn't feel as malicious, but I think that could in this case even be to serve the plot, because part of the story we're telling is about the cruelties of small groups of people, the cruelties that exist.
It's not, there's no technology to amplify it. This is just like, it is like your people at your high school. That's all you care about. That's all you know about. Like there's no outside. You can't just get on an app and find other friends. Like you are faced with the boredom of reality.
Yes.
And looking at these other, smelling the farts and looking at the faces of like these 250 people, that's your thing. Now, Sarah, I want to ask you a question. We were talking about the fashion, the 90s fashion, and I gotta say I'm living for it. Even though the shorts, the skirts are so short, I was shocked.
So short.
So you went to a Catholic school. How did you zhuzh up your Catholic school uniform? Because I went to a public school and I was like, how do you even exist? How do you live if you can't choose what you're wearing that day?
I wish that I could sit here in front of God on a fucking Monday and tell you that I was able to do anything with the uniform. My skirt almost went to my ankles. I had it from first year until sixth year. And for 6 years of my life, I went in tall. I will say that for myself. So, and it was constructed in such a way that you kind of couldn't even roll it up. It was a really oppressive piece of fabric. The one uniform changed, so we had white knee socks under a skirt that almost went to like our low calves, a jumper which, in an argument with people, I think you would say was grey. I think it was kind of purple, with and then a shirt that was a pale blue check and a navy blue tie. And then when you got to sixth year, your grey jumper became navy blue and your socks became navy blue as an indicator of power. Otherwise we would get yelled at if we rolled up the sleeves on our uniform or undid our top button. We were uniform with a capital U. We couldn't color our hair, we couldn't wear makeup, we couldn't wear nail polish or any earrings. We had to wear very homogenous shoes. I managed to get away with Doc Martens, I will say that. I had Doc Marten doll shoes, Mary Jane's, that I saved up money from my pub job and bought myself. They were 90 quid. Jesus.
Wow, damn.
Christ. That's how much I wanted to be different. So I wore my Doc Marten Mary Jane's and I had a school bag which had lots of pins on it, and it had an embroidered Elmo from Sesame Street.
Nice.
Who I
Nice.
had turned into Helmo using Tipp-Ex or Whiteout. So that is as far as I got. I also refused to carry a pencil case and kept my pens in my bun in my hair. And that was about as close as I got to any sort of expression of freedom. We also had to wear like name badges that had our photograph and our full name on them.
Whoa.
Turned out. So like we were operating under a really, really strict system.
Yeah.
So even wearing the docs and having the really punk, ugly school bag was something in a world where you could have almost nothing. I wish I could say, oh my God, I had like a short skirt and I had a nose ring. I fucking didn't, because it just wasn't worth being dragged out of class by a nun and gonna give to go to talk to another nun and sit there and be made feel like an asshole. You know, like it was really oppressive.
You're like, is it really worth to wear the rave bracelet that I got last weekend from my best friend? Not worth it.
To be sent up to the reception to have to take fucking nail polish off like a
Oh, really? They would
like
make you take it off. They would like watch you take it off.
Oh yeah.
Damn.
And if your shoe had a heel on it, like a proper heel on it, you'd be sent up to wear fucking slippers that were handed to you out of the office. Like, had they nothing better to do?
Can you imagine? Now I'm just imagining if this movie were Irish.
Oh my God.
It's like, you know, under a much more oppressive, like you said, uniform with a capital U kind of system. I wonder like how that would intensify some of the internal dramas that these characters are going through, and
I
also
will say,
alleviate some of that. They'd be like, our life is
we got meaner, we got crueler. We had a boys' school up the street from us who had an ongoing, the 6 years across each school had an ongoing feud. They burnt a giant dick into our front lawn using fire, but like spray cans and lighters as a indicator of war in 6th year. It was phenomenal. It was the best day of my entire education. It was before camera phones, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me personally.
Yes.
Like we had this ongoing war with the boys' school, but like it wasn't even that fun or interesting. Just every year something would happen. Like,
no, we had our high school had a similar thing. It was the senior prank kind of thing in my high school.
Like how they that was it, senior prank, and like that was about as exciting as it got. So the version of the Catholic high school that we see here, to me, is a really exciting version because it has boys and there's a universe in which you can change your fucking shirt and like wear earrings. If you wore a pair of crucifix earrings in Manor House, my school, you would have been sent home. You would have been sent home for a couple of days to think about what you did. Like
I was looking at the rosary that Fruza Bulk is wearing, like later when she wears that classic look she wears to the party with like the pointy witch shoes and the long black dress and just the long black crucifix. And I was like, one, that I'm gagging over this look.
Sick, like unbelievable.
But like, it's interesting how much that I love like the Irish and especially and Latin American Catholic magic to me is like two of my favorite flavors.
Same.
And this movie, I think, because of the Catholic, there is a magic to it. There's a lot of chanting, there's a lot of candle lighting, there's a lot of bell ringing.
Catholicism for people in Mexico and people in Ireland came in and swept over ancient traditions and ancient religious systems. So in those nations that have been bet down by Catholicism, you find these weird tendrils of our histories coming up through the blanket of Catholicism. For example, something that we see twice in the early movement of this film is we see two different Marys. Now, you guys know I love a Mary. I won't have them in my home, but I enjoy them in the world and I enjoy them in fiction and in iconography. I think about the various Marys, the various virgins that we see in, iconography all the time. Love a Mary. We see two early on in this film, but I don't fucking think it's Mary. I don't think it's Jesus's mom, Mary. I think it's Our Lady of Guadalupe, who's a different Mary.
Yeah.
So because it's LA and Mexico is mentioned, I was like, that's fucking not Mary.
Yeah.
That's Our Lady of Guadalupe. Now, do you guys know the story of her?
It's loosely. Like I know that she's like the first icon, like a brown-skinned icon for the church.
So I'm going to butcher this, but I'll give it to you in 2 lines. A friend of mine in San Francisco, I went to who's in San Francisco, Sarah from San like this wasn't lost on me, right? That Sarah had moved from San Francisco. I was sitting there going, okay, yeah, that sounds about right. So I had a friend who was Mexican He's Mexican, and I went to his apartment one day, and he had this neon fucking Virgin Mary in his living room, and I was like, "What the fuck is you doing here? Who invited her?" And he was like, "That's not the Virgin Mary. That's Our Lady of Guadalupe." And he
Yeah.
told me that she was an old god who took on the body of the Virgin during, I think it was the conquests, to walk among her people one last time before
Oh,
everything
wow.
was changed. And the reason that she wears the blue cloak of the Virgin is that underneath it, her hair is snakes.
Oh, wow.
That's
Hell
how
yeah.
that's what she's hiding under the cloak, is that her hair is snakes, which is very appropriate in this film. So
Yeah.
when I saw her twice early on, all I could think of was they're already telling us what they're going to do. They're
Mhm.
already showing us with this lovely incidental iconography and incidental storytelling that there are snakes under the cloak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we
the
will
beauty-
see hair as snakes. in
Hair
this
as
Hair
snakes.
movie.
as snakes.
Yes. Well, let's talk about the dynamics between these four girls. So it starts with kind of centered, like Chris is kind of somewhat of the inciting incident, right? Because Skeet Ulrich, douchebag football Chris, is hitting
Yeah.
on Sarah, the new girl. And he's like, what are you doing later? She's like, I don't know, nothing. He's like, well, I got football practice. Why don't you come watch? And so she does, and she's standing out by the fence watching Chris in football practice when Nancy, Fairuza Balk, and Bonnie and Rochelle approach. And they're like, this is
So like, we got
boring.
off on the wrong foot.
Yeah, this is boring.
Sorry.
Come hang out
Sorry
with
for being a bunch
us.
of bitches to you. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Our resting face is do not enter.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, hey, let's go shopping. And she said, well, I don't have any money. Well, the 5-finger discount. So
We're so rebellious.
we go out. I love, you guys mentioned, I think Cecil, you were the one who mentioned
it's important
early.
to it's also important to mention that this is where Nancy tells Sarah, I speak from personal experience. If you sleep with him or if you go out with him, he's just going to call you a slut the next day.
Yeah.
So like this, and I'm a bit of like, I'm not here to defend Nancy, but in this moment, she does state from the beginning, she's like, this is the deal with this guy.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that he says to Sarah upon acknowledging the three weirdos is like, fucking Nancy's a slut. He says it straight up. It's like, not that
Yep.
I'd know. So this is
Right.
already put in here. Also, as they're watching him play football, they make him fall.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or do they?
Or
Like,
do
so
they?
much of
Yeah.
magic here is plausibly deniable, which is why it's so elegantly put together. But this is the sort of first time I think that we really see like Nancy looks at something and it collapses. So I don't know if I'm an
Yeah,
Nancy
yeah, yeah.
apologist yet. I'll figure that out.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's a really interesting, inciting kind of scene.
I love
Well,
I love the sorry, Jeffrey, go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, not to like stall the intro of this movie further, but I think it's really interesting the way that magic happens early in this movie, because where I was with these three girls already in LA, not with Sarah, but these three girls in LA are real witches, like real world, the way witches exist in our world today, meaning they do not have the power of Manon to do like supernatural phenomenon, other than the fact that they have rituals, they have candles, they have crystals, they have incantations, they have circles, they have like powers of shapes, you know, and all of these things that relate to how to be one with nature, which is how to be a witch at its essence, one of the core essences there, and sort of understanding that everything is in balance, and we also use the word karma, karmic forces. And so in some way, when they make this boy fall in practice, some of it is because Nancy is like, run, Chris, go for the pass, baby. And he gets distracted and falls. But we will see a couple scenes later wherein another man falls down because he gets run over by a truck. That they all kind of feel like maybe we did that. And I think that's part of witchcraft, like real practical real world witchery.
Maybe we did that.
Maybe
Yeah.
we did that because there is a power to the shape of us in nature
and
that
to our
can cause
intention.
forces. Yeah, and to our
And
intention.
to our intention. Like there's so much
Yeah.
wishy-washiness around it, but that is, as somebody who has practiced kitchen witchcraft with many of the women in my life, so much is women sitting in various shapes
Mhm.
and lighting candles and speaking about our intentions, and whether or not that has any real world consequence doesn't matter, because the question lives on. Maybe we can, and maybe we did that. And in a world where power is generally wrenched from the hands of women, it's enough.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
was also
but it can
thinking
go
it's a-
wrong, obviously, too.
Oh yeah, it's also a very indicative of youth, of teenage. Like
Yes.
I had a group of four. I had like my
Mm.
four best friends were all women. Were young girls, women, and they were wild. And it reminded me of the power of when you are with your friends and you're 15, 16, 17 years old, not quite an adult, not quite a child, but you have a car, you have money, you have start to have interests and tastes and opinions, and you do change the world. And weird things like this happen. Like, is it just a guy chasing you down the street with a snake, or is it a message? And that is very indicative of this time. And even though all these actors are played by 30-year-olds, that to me is the most teenage thing about this movie.
So they go to the witch shop. Lirio is our lady who runs the witch shop. I love this, that so basically Sarah gets a really beautiful, like, hardbound cover with an embossed pentacle on the cover, gold embossed pentacle. It's a journal, it's a spell book, it's a place for writing your notes, writing your spells. It's huge, it's gorgeous. She gets that. She gets a fistful of candles and a book for how to, the witch, the magical powers of different types of candles.
Yeah.
She gets all of this, and the lady's like, $20. Like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Generally, that stuff's going to cost you an arm and a leg.
Oh yeah.
Like if you're buying a leather-bound like grimoire, that is
Yeah.
€55, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, and I think they do it in 10. I always walk out when I'm just like, I bought 3 more things. Then I'll go in for one, walk out with 3. And
Mhm.
I
You were
think
glamored.
that's
You were
part of the
glamored.
magic.
Yeah.
That's part of the magic. What, it's witchery.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So they we also, in this walk to the store, we also learn that Nancy points out to Sarah, she's like, "Hey, what happened to your wrists there?" And we learn that at one point in time Sarah had tried to slit her wrists before.
Yeah.
So
Which is sort of like this is a little vague, and because it is kind of backstory we're gonna get later, but it's like, is this the reason they're moving to LA? Is like it doesn't, we don't get much of Sarah. I think of Sarah in this movie as tofu. Sarah is the tofu that is just kind of waiting to be infused by new flavors.
mhm.
But
she's very a handy protagonist with the lost
Yeah.
parent and the vague trauma, and her story is kind of
Yeah.
untold at the beginning.
She just needs a journal and she'll be okay.
I
Which
also
which is again very indicative of a 90s, white female protagonist. It's
I
just
also
like,
think it's lovely that that it's also very resonant of being a teenage girl, that like teenage girls will just ask each other fucking wild shit. They will just see, scars on somebody and go, do that to yourself. Like teenage
Yeah.
girls say mad shit to
Yeah,
each
yeah,
other,
yeah.
and their lack of boundaries is absolutely astonishing. And it's also in those boundaryless spaces where you met somebody 3 hours ago and then you ask them a deeply personal question,
Yeah.
like Nancy does of Sarah. That's how you forge intensity in relationships. That's how you make a coven. That's how you make shit intense, is you ask blunt questions, and therefore, you know, like introduce an atmosphere of absolute honesty. I thought that was a really interesting move. I kind of half laughed. I was like, God, we say mad things to each other sometimes. Like women do ask each other very blunt things sometimes. But also I was like, that's very clever, because that's how she pulls Sarah in,
Yeah. It's not even to get the answer. It's more to see how she reacts to having her boundaries pushed.
Drops it like a grenade a little bit,
And then, like Nancy, Agent of Chaos, she's like, oh, well, she's like, oh, Okay, cool. You're my
Okay.
sister now. Here we go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she literally says, "Well, punk rock, let's go."
Yeah, and they end up walking away arm in arm.
So after they go to the magic shop, they're out on the streets of LA walking around, and there's this man with the snake that we saw earlier when Sarah first got to her house. And he just shows up randomly, and here he is on the street again, holding the snake, being like, "I got a snake for you. Also, I had a dream about you, and
I
you
have a message for you.
died in that dream." And she runs across the street to get away from him, and he just strolls out into traffic, and a Ford fucking Bronco runs his head over.
I love this effect. I love this effect because this is the first kind of horror action we're getting in the movie, and it's very action sequence because you see a dummy, like a stunt dummy, go under the wheels of a car. Like and the sound is just perfect. It's action movie, and I was like,
Practical effects is what it is.
Yeah.
Love everything here that we see. We definitely see something going on, something that is real going under the wheels of an actual car. There is no green screen nausea here. It's legit. I like the horror of this scene wider as she moves through presumably what is a part of downtown LA is the intensity of a bunch of people talking to her in the streets, which as somebody who didn't grow up in America, when I moved to America, I have very little experience of people just saying shit to you in the street. And that the intensity that she goes through on the street is really relatable. There's a lot of people saying a lot of stuff to her very, very quickly, and there's nothing she can do. She's completely disenfranchised, so she legs it, and your man with his terrifying snake pursues her only to be clunked. But it's a very unsettling scene. I think we're not in a horror film up until that point. I don't think, not really.
No,
it reminds me of 34th Street in New York. You know, this idea of like when I first moved to New York City, that intensity of like I'd never experienced. There's a man dressed as Uncle Sam screaming at me, and a man with the Bible, like, and that is like the cross section of America, of like Skid Row America. Like, what do you seek solace from? Jesus, USA, snakes, what, like crack cocaine? What do you want? There's a way out, or there's no way out, but we've got something for everybody here in Main Street, USA.
And she just has to get through it. She's new in town. She hates it. I'm afraid for her in that moment because I have been her in that moment. Oops.
Well, they gathered to the four of them gathered together afterwards, and they're like, "That was amazing. I kind of was willing that to happen." And the one of the others was like, "I was too. What about you, Sarah?" "Yeah, kind of." And so it's this feeling of, I think this circle is working. And Sarah's a little bit like, oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't to this, but it's the next point that Rochelle sort of explains who Manon is. They start talking about their Manon, and Sarah's like, "Is that God or the devil?" And they're like, no. If the God and the devil are, say, it's a football game between God and the devil, Manon is the stadium. Manon is the air around it. Manon is all things. Manon is all of nature. And we would maybe Manon will start to listen to us now. And Nancy says, "You can also invoke the spirit of Manon into you, and he will make everything that's gone wrong better again." And Sarah's like, "Yo, I gotta bounce."
Yeah, I hate this.
Please.
This is getting weird. I'm going home. Like, she's just like, absolutely not. They've let her off the road into this like slightly cool but also slightly weird drinking spot. Like, they're having a nagging, like they're chilling out, but Nancy gets very real very quickly. It's at this point that you realize as well that they're incanting the elements. And I realized that we actually have a really solid, because they call her a natural witch. So each of them are assigned a corner to call, right? Rochelle's is water because she's a swimmer. Bonnie's is fire because she has experienced burns and has horrible burns. Sarah's is earth because she's natural of the earth, like she's the most innately, organically, naturally talented of them. And then Nancy's is the air, which is in witchcraft and the esoteric, connected with the mind, and she's somebody who is disconnected ultimately from her body by her mind. I think it's a lovely introduction to what they want, you know what I mean, what their witchcraft, what they aspire their witchcraft to be. And I love that Sarah pieces out early. She's like, "This is fucking too much for me, man."
When she's also gonna go do makeouts with Chris on some rooftop. Okay, this is, you mentioned earlier, Cecil, about the lack of, this is not technology because we're 1996
Right.
here. Like there is no cell phone, there's no checking in. I'm just imagining Sarah's parents are like, all right, you've had a history of self-harm. We're going to move you to a new town. It's Los Angeles, California, where you are brand new. And then the first day of school, you were just out until, what is this, like 10:30 at night?
Yeah.
Did she call home? There's no like find my daughter's iPhone app to track down where
no one's
is.
getting air tagged in 1996,
No.
I think it is. I had that same feeling. I was like, already? That's a long day for you, Sarah. Are you
right for day one, girl? You're going hard.
Well, especially because with what happens next and like the movement that happens like quickly next. I think we're getting some oozy timey stuff.
Yeah,
that we're not.
Like
it's not being
one.
demarcated properly.
This is more week one than day one.
Yeah, or month one. I think we're getting, but it's not, unfortunately, really demarcated in a way that's helpful. So you're looking like, oh, she's meeting him after practice. What's happening here? It's late at night. So I think that's kind of a bit of a downfall. It's like, oh man, just show me like a wristwatch or a calendar or like a brief montage. Give me a break here.
Yeah.
Chris says, why don't we go back to my house? No one's home. She's like, listen, I gotta go home. It's getting late. He's clearly mad, and the next day displays how mad he is because he tells everyone that they fucked and it was the worst day of his life, and she's a slut. He'll never be around her again. He tells her, like, says out loud in the hallway to Sarah, hey, I don't want to go out with you. Stop begging. And she's just like, man, fuck you.
He is so scary in the like when his face turns when she says, "Nah, I'm good." You can see this sort of hardness come across his face, and I'm like, I've fucking seen that face, man. I think most people who sleep with dudes have seen that face at some point, and that is the real ugly power of a teenage boy that they will exert. Is if they can't get what they want, they will still punish you. They will still tell everyone you're a slut, even if you're not. They will still tell everyone you're mental, even if you're not. It was really like, it's very distressing and also very authentic. Like that is how teenage boys exert their power over teenage girls, is that they just make shit up. And that's almost exactly how she puts it. She's like, you lied, and she's very ballsy. To go straight up to him because she's kind of got nothing really to lose at this. She's too new in the school, I think, to be falling into a hierarchy. Day two.
Yeah,
that happened. Yes, I flew in a day and a half ago. And
but she's so mature in this moment because she's acting really like an adult. She's like, can we just talk? What? Like she's got whiplash, and it would be so simple for this guy to just be like, no, just walk away. But he can't because all of him and his friends, he's like pumped up by his little friends.
Yeah.
He
the
can't.
Gross triad. They're awful.
Yeah. I think that's a really great way of putting it, Cecil, about like Sarah being an adult, because I think what makes her character in this film feel a little bit like tofu that doesn't have all of the seasoning yet is because she's a rational character. She's a person who is trying to actually tell people and herself, listen, I don't think punishing other people is the way to find balance. And the person who wants to find balance is one of the least interesting fictional characters because they're doing the thing we all know we should do, like dishes. Dishes should be done. That doesn't mean we should make a movie about it. And so I think that's what makes her a little bit...
Unless you're Chekhov. And then,
that's right. But there's always something seething underneath the doing dishes in Chekhov or something. So, and I think
I love her. Like, she knows, she's like, and she doesn't take it from her friend. She's like, no, I will pay for this book. Stealing is wrong. I was brought up in this. No, you don't talk about people behind their back. Fuck you. You're burned, like, and good for, like, I think her character as a protagonist, she's a great one.
Yeah, she's very, I think because the worst thing, like she has had such an unknowable and horrendous start in her life in that her mom is dead, like that is, and through childbirth, like she's a really, really hard start in the world, really nightmarish. So she obviously carries the burden of some of that on her shoulders. Her dad is a new partner. She's already gone through some big real life stuff that many, many, many young people won't experience until much later. They probably won't have to move their whole lives across the country. They probably, well, okay, it's not across the country, but San Francisco is far away from Los Angeles. It's a very big state.
It's a different
very
mindset.
big. Okay, very big state. Different landscape. But she has gone through a lot already, so I like that her matter of fact maturity is it's founded in experience, you
Yeah.
know.
Mhm.
She
Yeah.
has a bit of world experience behind her, so she doesn't really tolerate bullshit. She has a moral center.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we've got all four of these girls have something that they want or that is bugging them, right? And so
Mm.
for Sarah, she still wants Chris, like, because she is a teenager, right? And so, like,
Yeah.
he's still very cute. And if he were just nice, he was nice. I saw him be nice in a moment. And if he were just nice all the time, he would be dreamy. And then you've got, oh God, poor Rochelle, who's
Oh my
got
Okay,
God.
let's get into Rochelle here.
Yeah.
this fucking girl. This is what is her name? Christine Taylor, is that her name? Christine Taylor from
From Zoolander.
comedian and actor.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
she's
yeah.
Marsha
She's
Brady from the Brady Bunch.
Marsha Brady.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
know
yeah.
her face
Yeah.
from somewhere, and she does. There's a little bit of like generic American lady face happening in this
Mhm.
film, but like
Mhm,
I
mhm.
knew I could recognize her as like she's Marsha Brady. There you
Yeah,
go.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Boy, she plays Laura, who's also in on the swim team or the diving team or swim class or whatever. Whatever this class is, where
The
there
Splish
is
Splash Gang.
the Splish
Yeah.
Oh my
Splash.
God.
I love your school, Sarah, where it's like, well, I have shapes in second period and I have splish splash at fourth period.
This is what I should be in charge of the national education system.
Yeah.
I know what's important to teach our youth.
Like, well,
Splishing,
splish-
splashing,
Splishing.
shapes.
Shapes.
That's it. And colors. Shapes and
And
colors.
And snacks. That's the most
snacks.
important.
Yes.
Because all the full movement of the educational system. But yeah, they're in the pool. And Rochelle is taken to the diving board.
Yeah. And they're bullying the fuck out of Rochelle
Yeah.
because she's black.
Yeah.
Like, it's
And she literally tells her that. She
Yeah.
literally tells her that is why I do not like you.
Shockingly so. I
Yeah.
could not believe it. You couldn't put it in a film today, and the impact of it is like being hit with a hammer. It's so shocking to hear somebody say it, but you also kind of need to, because that is how people talk to each other. That is how people exert racism to each other in private spaces, in schools, where they can pick on a minority. Like Rochelle, there's not a lot of people of color in the general ambient background of the school, and it's shocking and it's necessary. And Rochelle holds her nerve so well. She holds her shit together in the face of abject, disgusting racism. Like, it's really, really striking scene.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot, you know?
Yeah.
However, I want to talk about some of the racial implications of the movie in general, because Noelle True is the actress who plays this part, and she experienced so much bullshit racism in the releasing of this movie. Like, she was left out of all the promotional materials. Like, when this movie won the MTV Teens Choice Award or whatever, and all that, like, this is the heyday of that, she was left out. She was of the three that went, the three white girls went, and she didn't go.
Rachel True.
Whoa.
Like, and it's this really intense. It's also another thing about, I started watching the background extras of this film, and most of them are brown. Like, most of them are like Latinx, like Latin, like it's really fast just to be like, this is the core group of the mean white people at this school. However, there's so many other people at this school. Like, to go to school in Los Angeles, and this is the core. It's myopic. You know, like there's like a splinter in the eye of this film, and I think it is that, like, you know, what do we know about Rochelle? We never meet her parents. She's the only one of the four that we never meet her parents. We never see what her home was like. Her, you know, reason of existing is to be the sort of, so we can have a black friend, and that is it. And I think that in the conversation that this movie, and especially because I respect the fuck out of Miss
Rachel True.
Miss Rachel True.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a little like verklempt, because it's, I don't know, it's that thing that is looking back at this movie of, you know, like, it it is shocking to hear it, and it's shocking to have this plot line. However, that plot line was kind of added with the casting of a Black actor to make it into look, we're talking about racial issues. And it is problematic, and it's hard because it's trying really hard to do the right thing, and yet put 20 more years on it, and we're like, oh shit, there's still so much.
Yeah,
there's still so much context happening around this fantasy, this teenage action fantasy, that now that we know that, I don't know, it's just like that story that has unfolded over the past 20 years is really interesting to me, and is hard for me to watch and to think about. My nostalgia sucks when you don't nostalgia sucks when you start to unpack it.
yeah.
I
Well,
will say that Rachel True is a esoteric practitioner and has an amazing tarot deck called the True Tarot, I think, and is like, to this day, her contemporary practicing of witchcraft is really interesting and really compelling. If that was something that anybody wanted to look at, because I discovered it recently and was just like kind of blown away by her and by the esoteric work that she does. So she is a real living, breathing witch in the flesh in her life outside of her acting career as well,
Right.
which is really, really cool. I think it's really, really
it
cool.
is True Heart Tarot.
TrueHeartTarot.
TrueHeartTarot.com. So you guys should check that out. Yeah, I felt that too, Cecil, in this movie, that there was something. It still exists today. I was just having this conversation with a lesbian friend of mine about the queering of like mass media, right? Like, which is a great thing, wherein we start seeing, especially when we start seeing more people of color in films, we start seeing more queer representation in television shows and films. But at the heart of it all is still there's still a branding that's happening, right? And I know we use signaling, right? Virtue signaling is part of this branding, but it's long existed in Hollywood, where they start sensing that there's an unserved market here. It's capitalism at work. And it's not necessarily truly looking at what the makeup of a Los Angeles County school is. It is just simply saying, we're underserving a Black market. If we're not drawing Black people in, we should have a Black character, which is
we're
a very
leaving money on the table.
Yeah,
which
the dollar.
is good, which is a step up from not including any Black people in an LA school. But it is not quite as virtuous as say, you know what, we should reflect the world as it truly is. And there is a thing that sort of happens, I think, in like 2020, the 2020s, as we start seeing more queering of characters on television. You have to always know in the back of your mind that it is mostly cis straight white people in Hollywood, men primarily, still making a lot of decisions that are like, yeah, we absolutely need more queer characters. Let's throw in a bunch of queer characters. Can they kiss? And you're like, okay, we've come a long way since 1995, but that's still a cynical way of approaching it. We did, when Joseph and I first started pitching Night Vale to people, I remember as a TV show, like in 2013, 2014, when we first went out and started pitching, and we would have meetings and we would mention about the importance of, diversity of casting, because it was something in that time period it was in the conversation. We were noticing like this is a thing, and a lot of people would say, well, you can't really guarantee casting, as writers, you're not going to be able to ever guarantee that. By about year 5 of pitching this fucking show, we would say, before we would even say it, people that we would meet with, they were like, will this have a diverse cast?
Yeah.
And you could tell how much the conversations in the 2010s about how, Oscar's so white and things like that had gotten to these people, and they were changing not because of any virtue, but they were changing because they'd been yelled at. And which is good. We should yell at people who are doing bad things. And I just found that interesting. And so watching Scream, we're watching The Craft, the other 1996 horror film starring Neve Campbell and Skeet Ulrich. But watching The Craft, I couldn't help but to think of that too, that we were entering an era where somebody at least took the step of saying there needs to be a Black main character.
Yeah.
So we all go out. Oh, the other thing is, we have the other two bugaboos for our other two girls in the coven are Bonnie has burn marks all over her body from a previous accident, and she hates herself for it. And Nancy lives with drunk ass abusive stepdad and
Stepdad
fuck-ass
and-
mom in a
yeah.
shitty trailer. And so they go out, they grab the witch bus to the witch country, and they go out and this is a good line. This is such a 90s film. We've got to have one-liners. The man driving the bus, as the girls get off the bus, says, you girls watch out for those weirdos out there. And she goes, we are the weirdos, mister.
Oh, Nancy.
Astounding. And they're all standing there at the bottom of the bus steps in their perfect outfits with their amazing little 90s sunglasses, like
Mhm.
just so elegantly put together. And that line has been the line that sold 1 million tote bags. That has been handed back to me more times than I can count, because it resonates and it's
Yeah.
lovely and it's a nice dream, isn't it? That
Yeah.
teenage girls shouldn't have to worry about the weirdos because they're the weirdos. Like, what a lovely little fantasy for them to have, for us to have, even in
that
that
literally
moment,
that I had
you
that
know?
moment happen to me a week ago, where like I was out in conservative country,
Right.
and it was like there with another queer man, and we were just tooling around, and it was this thing of like somebody like, be careful for those those hippies, and I was like, oh, mm-hmm,
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
I'll keep an eye out.
Will
Yes,
do. Will do.
Captain.
Yeah, yeah.
So they go and have basically they have an intentions ceremony, essentially.
Yeah.
Of they have their circle, they're now this foursome, and they're doing their ritual, and they're placing out the things that they want, right? They're wishing for, taking things. They're
Yeah.
asking, they're taking from Manon of what they want. And Sarah still wants Chris. So there's a photo of Chris, and Bonnie wants her beautiful skin. And Nancy, Rochelle wants Laura to fuck right off, like to get her comeuppance for being a racist piece of shit.
Yeah.
And Nancy's like, I take for me all the power of Manon.
I just want to be God. I just want to be God.
She just kind of throws a curveball in there. I was like, Nancy, you're supposed to write these down. I think this kind of like, it's like wedding vow territory. You don't really just wing it. But wing it. She does.
I love this whole sequence and the whole ritual as well, because they encancel the language of it is lovely. They say as above, so below, with the dagger pointing to the sky and then to the earth, which I live for the language of this sort of ceremony. I think it's so lovely. And this is where we get Chekhov's dagger as well. The dagger is very important. It's the first time we see it. It's not the last time we see it. And we get some lovely sapphic imagery, because each of the girls, as they vow to go into the circle, have a little kiss, which again feels totally transgressive and also completely correct as to how they would behave with each other. It's really intimate and really lovely. And that lovely fairy tale imagery again of pricking their fingers and putting them in the same cup. We do have a mention of the period. Actually, the first thing Nancy says in the whole film is that, like, as they're talking about something is coming, like change is coming, Nancy's like, yeah, I'm on my rag, like what, there is mention of blood, and then we see blood again. This is what I mean about everything tying in together so carefully and so neatly. And this ceremony is where we see a lot of that stuff, I think, kind of come together. And I think the language that they use when they make their wishes is really important, because Rochelle says she wants to not hate her.
Yeah.
That's her wish. And Bonnie's wish is she wants to be as beautiful on the outside as she is on the inside.
She just wants to love herself.
Yeah, and that is very important for the kind of journey that Bonnie goes on herself, that she wants to maintain her inner beauty, or have her outer beauty maintain her inner beauty. And Rochelle doesn't actually, and she would have been fucking dead right to be like, fuck that bitch. I want her to get her comeuppance, but instead
she's taking the fucking high road.
God, she doesn't have to, but she takes the high road, and she's like, I want to not hate her. I want there to be peace between us. So the wishes they have, and even Sarah being like, I want to love myself more, and I want Chris to like me too. And there's something really small and earnest about their wishes. That is where we see them as girls in girlhood here, is that the wishes that they have and the things they want are really honest. They, like, Rochelle wants her bully to fuck off. Bonnie wants to be not defined by the scars that she has, because she knows that's the thing that all teenage girls are told, her beauty's within. That doesn't matter a fuck when you're having a hard time in school. Their wishes are so small, and Nancy just turns around and is just like, I want to be God, let's do it. Like, she comes out of the blue with that, and it is fantastic, and it's so at odds with the kind of game that the others are playing.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant moment.
Butterflies show up, proving that the magic has worked.
Yeah.
Oh, the butterflies. It's so lovely. Again, so lovely and so at odds with Nancy being fucking power mad and intense. There's a real, I think there's something very beautiful, like a little signal from the universe that the girls have. I made that happen, right?
Yeah.
I incanted that into being.
Yeah. So the days that follow, now we've got Chris following Sarah around being like, hey, yeah, can I sit with you in mass? Can I carry your books? Can I carry your friends' books?
Love slave.
She's like, wait, did you tell your friends that you were a total asshole and lied about everything? No, but I will. I'll do it first thing in the morning. I'm on it. I will tell them I'm an asshole and lied. And we've also got Laura starts losing her hair. Racist
man.
Laura, her hair is coming out in clumps.
And like it's also like that her scalp is, she's sort of afflicted by boils. It's pretty, and this is pretty gross.
Yeah. And we'd had a previous scene where Bonnie had gone to basically a dermatologist, or it's like a skin surgeon, to basically do injections to try and fix her skin. And the next time she follows up with that, like the scars are like peeling off like dried Elmer's glue, which is probably what they were made of.
Yeah. This is Cronenberg. This is not. But it is like, I love the sequence where we saw her earlier on with getting the needling done, because one thing that the doctor says is that this is going to be painful, but effective. The painful thing. And we see her in pain. Like we see her like crying in pain as she's getting it done to her, which is one of those, again, the horror of being a teenage girl, the horror of being in a feminine body is that doctors simply will not give you pain relief for anything that's done to you. And the relief is so palpable in her. And for Rochelle, when she jumps off the diving board while Laura is losing her hair and becoming as rancid on the outside as she is on the inside, the diving instructor
notices her. Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And that's important, I think.
And has
Rochelle.
a look on his face like, where has she been the whole time?
This whole time,
Maybe, sir, had you been like keeping your classroom in control and not letting like rampant racist bullying happen, maybe the one black girl in your class would have been more comfortable and succeeding, which seems to be happening now.
And maybe her head's in the game.
Yeah.
That French teacher can fuck right off if we're talking about the teachers. I was like, there's a lot of boy chatter happening here that needs to not happen right now.
The utmost like misogynist boy chatter. Like they are saying the most sexist bullshit ever.
So gross. It's so gross. And it's also very authentic. It's also very authentic in a way where it's like, this is a lot. Like, and the turnaround also, what's nice about these magical things is that Laura could have been undergoing an allergic reaction or alopecia.
Sure.
Yeah.
It could have been in
Bonnie's surgery could have just worked.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're right.
Plausible deniability around those two. Whereas with what happens with Nancy is a little bit later, but there's is it? I think it's a little bit later because
I was about to get to it. So go ahead and tell us
Yeah.
what happens with Nancy, because that's the fourth thing that happens after the
Well,
ceremony.
they're having some lovely nights, gal pal nights together before we see.
There
what
is a bit of
happens with
montage,
Nancy.
a magic montage.
Yeah,
Which I loved, which is just gals lying in a heap, smoking joints and talking. And
sleeping bag, popcorn.
Oh my god, it's so wholesome.
The wheel. Did you notice? I'm talking about tarot linguists. Did you notice the Wheel of Fortune on in the background?
I didn't. That's a brilliant detail. That is
just like
so
little
good.
things like that.
Detail, lovely. And the room they're in is that lovely 90s bedroom. I love. I think I would love to start like a newsletter that's just like American houses of cinema, because the houses are so lovely and the details of the bedroom are so cozy. And they're having such a nice time. That's what being in a coven is, It's being around your fellow people and being close. And there's a real intimacy to what they have. And I think at some point, like we have Nancy is massaging cream into Bonnie's back again.
Well, she's not even massaging. No, she is, but it's also she's
tender,
almost like a Reiki. She's giving her like back Reiki.
It's really tender, really sweet. And there is a point at which I think might have been Bonnie and Rochelle are like, what's up with Nancy? And it's like, oh, well, her magic hasn't started to work yet. It's like, what did she wish for? And she's like, oh, I think she just didn't want to be white trash anymore.
Yeah.
Like something like that, because there is an
Yeah.
air of wealth around everybody else.
Mhm.
Whereas Nancy has that tough edge, the slicked back hair, a slight undoneness to her, which is indicative, I think, or meant to be indicative, I think, of like of a more working class or of poverty.
Well, she seems like she would be the one to get off school and go to work. She would have the job to bring it, but she doesn't really, because she's fucking off with her witch friends.
Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, what we see in her house is when her magic does come in is pretty different.
Well, so we see Nancy in her trailer with her mom and stepdad, and we've got a like one stepdad like grabs her skirt and is like, oh, you can almost see straight up this. Like he's just so
like,
gross. She's like hands off, slaps his hand away. Mom comes out to kind of stand up for her daughter, and then he, comes at mom. Yeah, he comes at mom, fist raised, and Nancy lets out a huge scream. Basically, the whole kitchen goes up in flames.
Yep.
And stepdad has a fucking heart attack. And the next thing we see is next thing we see is
like they're in their burnt out trailer.
Yeah, next thing we see is insurance guy shows up and he's like, turns out at his job he had a pension plan with life insurance and you've got $175,000 coming to you, with which we're talking about shock of prices of the $20 in the store. Yeah. She buys a fucking condo in downtown LA for $175,000. Right?
But also, this is the thing, man, of like, did you get what you wanted, Nancy? Did you get what you wanted, or did you get what you needed? You got what you wanted, but you didn't get what you needed. Like it's this is still a Hollywood film, and it's like problem solved. Money makes everything better.
And again, for her element, her element is air. Then she has a house in the sky. Like that's what she wants, you know. In this sequence as well, we forgot something before we go ahead, and if I let it go, I will lose my mind because we get the iconic, unforgettable, extremely sapphic, light as a feather, stiff as a board.
Oh my god,
sequence
this sequence
that happens. I think it happens in the film just before we see Laura losing her hair. It happens just as it's when all their friendships are starting to form, and it's fantastic. It's lovely. It's such a wonderful aspirational scene of friendship. It's also, I would say that a lot of when you see stuff that is coded as queer in cinema and television now, it's a bit more like wink. It's a bit more obvious, whereas this is a little more subtle. I think she's like, well, you put your index finger and your middle finger under here. Like it's all very like but it's not, but they don't pause to go wink. Like
they do because one of them is like, wait,
they crack wise a little bit.
They crack wise because Rochelle's like, or who I think it's
put your finger where?
Put my fingers where?
Yeah, that's true, but it's not
very,
like.
But that's very that ironic
90s.
Yeah. But it's so like the sort of the Janine Garofalo-ness of the 90s of like, we're going to comment on it, but we won't linger on it.
We're not looking at the audience; we're looking at each other, and they're kind of like, "Oh, she weighs a ton." They're messing with each other, but they're not looking at the audience, going, "Look." Like they're looking at each other.
Lesbianism.
Teenage girl bodies, and it's really like it's lovely. It's lovely in the way that they do it, and then it's shattered by the arrival of a parent. And it's
I love seeing this sequence because it's when they're doing not incidental magic, not oh my gosh, my bully is having a rough time, which is in line with my intentions, but not exactly magic. This is magic. This is this is magic. You changed the universe. You are this is flight, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it comes out of a place. It's this and the glamour sequence are very interesting to me because it comes out of it's not their zeitgeist for living is to like change their hair color, but it's a way that they've discovered a hobby that they're really good at that gives them joy. That just gives them the giggles.
It also
to me is like it's like the gift of art. Like any craft, any art and craft should do that. Yeah. Like it's the shit. The when you're writing jokes, when you're writing jokes, probably it's gonna be shit. But when you say something that's funny to your friends and they laugh, you've found something.
Life worth living,
That's
and
the craft of it.
Well,
they're playing, you know?
Yeah.
and to speak to the craft of screenwriting too, I think they do a really nice job of with the light as a feather scene and with the scene just shortly after with the glamour where they
Glamour.
teaching glamour where Sarah's just like, I changed my eyes into brown
They're
instead
like,
of green.
oh,
They're like,
They're
try
so
something bigger.
unimpressed.
And
yeah,
then
yeah. But
then,
that reaction
she,
is so real. They're like, oh, did you? Oh,
like, I never noticed.
nice,
But then she
subtle.
changes her hair into
Subtle.
blonde,
Subtle.
and so it tells us as the viewer that we have moved from real magic of the
Yep.
world, the way witches live now. I need you to know in these very small moments, which also serve as beautiful bonding experiences for these girls, to show how close of friends they can be, how tight their
Yeah.
circle can be. But also, it is important that I let you know that magic is actually real.
We're in
Now,
a
what
horror
I'm
movie.
doing is I'm going to show you how
Yeah.
this movie is taking it up one level higher than what
Yeah.
is real. So now it is only real in the movie. Everything else you've seen beforehand is real. And so all of the power of their circle is 100% real. And I think these two scenes serve as, let me elevate it later, because we will see the glamour used and we will see the levitation used.
Yep.
And so I think those two things are really, really important.
And in the and to follow up on the Wheel of Fortune in the background, what is on the background of the television when they're doing Light as a Feather Stiff Support?
It's Bewitched, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lovely sequences.
Which is so, I mean, it's one, I love an animated sequence.
Mhm.
But it's also the idea of a woman who's having to hide her innate ability to fit in with modern society, quote modern society. Like that's the plot of Bewitched.
Yeah.
I'm so
Perfect.
lucky to have this woman as my wife. Too bad she's a witch. We must repress.
Oh no, to push her
And
down.
hijinks ensue.
So now we're going to start seeing a bit of a turn here for all of these intentions that they had, because Chris won't leave Sarah alone. He's like at her window. Literally, they say here they give you a timestamp, 3 a.m. He's like, maybe we can move in together. I think I love you. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I can't stop thinking about you. At the witch shop, Nancy buys the Invocation of the Spirit book, because she's raring to go. Listen, I'm gonna tell you something. We live in a country in the United States wherein bartenders can go to jail if they overserve somebody who gets in a DUI accident.
Oh yeah.
But we do not punish gun shop owners for selling guns to crazy people. And this Lirio, she knows these kids are insane. She knows this magic is real. And she's like, yeah buy the book, buy the AR-15 of witch books,
Oh
kid.
gosh, I didn't
Off
think
you
about
go.
that. Yeah.
25
Go
bucks.
ahead.
Off
Yeah,
you
she's
go.
like, okay. Oh, you must be a very, and she's like, oh, you must be a very accomplished witch. And she's like, don't preach at me, lady. And she's like, okay. Just don't break the fabric of the universe while you're at it.
Magic doesn't kill people. Witches kill people.
Magic bullets do.
Magic bullets do.
Very frustrating.
Okay.
Darkener.
And then then they have another ceremony at the beach where they bring a snake, a butterfly, and a bird. These aren't
two
fully
birds.
Jars.
Yeah.
It's all in charge. Actually, this is kind of an interesting tidbit from the IMDb page. They did have a witch consultant, a witchcraft consultant on set that was very present. And apparently during these ceremonies, weird shit would happen on set.
Ooh.
Literally from the time, and they said they made up the name Manon. But Manon is apparently very similar to Manon, which is the Celtic goddess of the sea. And apparently when they did these rituals, from the moment that they started chanting to the moment that it ended, huge swells of tides would come in. Flights of bats would fly around them overhead and then would all sort of dissipate when they stopped shooting. The candles were like, apparently it was very witchy on set as well.
Damn.
Love intention, setting intentions. Did we make this
That's
happen?
all it takes.
Did we make this happen?
I
That's
think
the big
something
question.
this movie put something out into the universe. Then, like, we're still feeling its reverberations to this day.
And I think as well, we know at this point, I think Sarah has said out loud to the girls during the sort of the cozy BFF sequences that she has had hallucinations from, she says it here. She says it here on the beach.
Yeah.
This is when she tells them that she has had hallucinations wherein she saw snakes and the snakes were real. You know, the things come out of her dreams that are real. So she is at this point unknowingly handing Nancy ammunition, which she will use against her later. And they also point out that it is in bulk. It is the night before the first night of, oh, sorry, no, it's Beltane or Beltane, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Everyone says it differently. I always have Beltane in my head. Maybe that's not exactly how we say it. But it's the night before the first night of May.
Spring. It's May. It's May Day.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's in the middle of summer. So that's a pretty special, you know, time for the incanting of folk magic and things like that. During the ceremony as well, I noticed that when Nancy opens it up by summoning Manon, she says "I," and then Bonnie has to go "us."
Correct, sir. Us,
It's we. It's us. It's not me. It's us. And she has to stop her and kind of pull her back down off of the power trip that she's on.
So running off that note, let's go back to the opening of like, who's the cop? What do you do when you're in a tight circle and you see one of your friends becoming a megalomaniac? Like, what do you do? Do you not like politely correct but move on and not discuss? You know, like try to cut it out. Like, what do you do?
What do you do?
And I think this is where this movie is a bit of it has to happen to have the grand good versus evil sequence. But in reality, it would have been much more like, is everything okay, Nancy? Nancy, we gotta talk a little bit, you know?
Yeah,
like,
blow out the candles for a minute. Are you okay?
Yeah. Hold up, girl. Like, I think there is more like internal policing that might happen in small communities that, you know, no community's a utopia.
Can I throw this out, which is as the one lefty in my family going home for the holidays, which is not a thing I do anymore.
Yeah.
But you can't discuss with people. Now, one-on-one is it depends on who it is.
Yeah.
But for the most part, once you're in a group and those other three girls are already there, and I think Sarah knows it. Because we'll see the scene
Sarah's starting to see the writing on the wall a little bit.
So Sarah is like, she doesn't even call Nancy out for saying, "Hear me, Manon," because she says, "Hear me, Manon," and then Sarah says, "Hear us." Actually, I think it's Bonnie that corrects her, but like they're all doing what they can. But I think there is a feeling once you know in a group, one of the problems with the group dynamic is, and especially with these other three girls, are all going to be on the same page. When everybody's on the same page together, it either means they'll gang up on you, which is what happens in the third act of this film, or what you have is you have one person, which is the thing I've experienced in my family, is one single person creating the terror and everyone else not wanting to cause the problem. And so so
everybody else just lies low.
If you interact with that person, you have done the bad thing, even if you are standing up for yourself, even if you are fighting back. And so I related to not taking on Nancy in this moment, because
sometimes just easier not to. The consequences,
you're just accelerating your demise, and she's going to do this. She's going to accelerate her demise, just not as quickly as if she had done it right in this moment.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I love this. I love that Fairuza Balk she goes full crazy from this point on.
Oh yeah, she's phenomenal. Yeah, her face, she's brilliant.
Her lines in the scene after because she's like, "Manon, fill me," and gets struck with lightning. They all wake up the next morning, and they see her out walking on the ocean.
Yeah,
and she comes out to the beach and she says, "He blessed me." And then when they find the dead sharks everywhere, she touches her hands to one and she says, "These are my gifts. I am your daughter now," to the heavens. I'm like, these lines are priceless.
And it's also it's the fact that Manon is a he. So he has filled me. It's so sexual. Like like with lesser actors, this would be trash. And it would be pure trash. But like these four actors imbue it with like sort of that sort of Shakespeare invocation, but it's so sexual. Like I can still feel him touching me. I can feel him inside me. Like it's huge. It's huge.
And I think that's what freaks Sarah out at first when they're having that conversation in the sort of like the green area the first night when they're all drinking together, and she pieces out and she's like, "This is fucking too much for me." I think it's because Nancy does invoke. She's just like, "Yeah, you invite him into," like, it's really sensual, and Sarah's like, "Nah, I'm good. This is too much." See you later.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
I don't need to. I'm not inviting anybody into me.
And of course, not tonight, girl. See you later. Goodbye. And I think that's really important for Nancy's characterization is her sensuality and her sexuality, because that is something that also Chris flags out her straight up front, is that she's a slut. And there is, I say this from very hard experience, nothing worse that you can be called socially as a teenager than crazy, only a slut. Crazy's pretty bad, and a slut is pretty bad, and a crazy slut, my God.
Yeah.
My God, it's a wonder any of us made it out alive. And she has both, but her sensuality is really forefront to her power here. Like her sexuality is right there in the language she uses, and it's unabashed for a film. And he is male, obviously. He's calling down a male power, so it's not like full femo earth goddess shit here. This is there is a male presence, be it Manon or Chris, that Nancy and Sarah are orbiting and satellites around throughout here.
So Chris is now calling Sarah, and she actually does go out with him.
Like, why not?
And
Let's
she
see
let's
the worst
see.
that
And
could
also,
happen.
I think she's a little disturbed about what was happening at the beach and what Nancy is doing, because a scene before, she's noticing and saying out loud to these girls, like, Bonnie, you're being super narcissistic.
Yeah.
Nancy, you're being reckless. Like, you're
You've been
driving.
Oh, in the
changed.
car, in the red sports car. Yeah.
You've changed. You
know?
got the thing. You know what? I love this movie. It's what is your character wish for, and what is your character afraid of? Like, we get both of those. We know the ultimate wish, we know the ultimate fear, and this movie feels so complete because we do kind of hit on all four of them.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of after this moment where she decides to go out with Chris, because what we see in the car, they're parked up on like Makeout Point or whatever, and she's telling Chris all the things she's going through, and he's like, yeah, I totally understand. And she's like, do you know what you're talking about? And
What
he's
did I
like,
just say to you?
Yeah. He's like, I agree with whatever you say. I am whatever you say. It's funny, I was just thinking, I don't know what I'm talking about. And
which is why love spells are the worst kind of spell. That's what you do to somebody, right? Like, you're
like, I want you to want me. That's love.
Yeah.
Not just like want it, or the opposite of, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it's dangerous to just someone to want you.
Yeah, you could write a computer program that tells you you're handsome every day, but
many people do. Many people do.
Right.
That is the age that we live in. It's something that always strikes me from those really, really resonant memories you have from childhood and films. I remember watching Aladdin and the 3 Rules of Making Wishes for the blue from Robin Williams's Big Blue Genie. One of them is no wishing for more wishes. And one of the others is no love spells. Yeah. And I didn't really understand why, but I knew that was important. And any stories that I've read ever since have only sought to clarify that is the worst thing that you can wish for, is for somebody to, because you're removing their agency.
Yeah.
However, while on one hand you might feel briefly sorry for Chris, his agency being removed around how he feels about Sarah does not remove his physical agency, which is where, again, this film reminds us that it is a horror story. In the car on the side of the road.
Well, we're reminded what Lirio said in the witch shop, which is, hey, whatever you gain, everything is balanced, right? So whatever you send out comes back to you. Do unto
poke
others.
the universe will poke back.
Yeah.
3 times 3 usually.
3 times 3.
And Sarah, Sarah, that's an amazing point about the love spell taking away his agency, because what ends up happening is when she refuses and runs away, he tries to take her agency by sexually assaulting her, and she manages to get free. And then by her going to her friends and telling them what Chris just did, Sarah knows why he did this. I mean, 1, he's a dickhead at heart, but 2, it's because she put this spell on him, and she doesn't. We've got to figure out how to undo what we've done here, because he's going to continue to be a problem. And Nancy's solution is, no, what if I now take his agency?
If I was the problem.
What if I then went, and she does the double dupe thing where she's like pretending to be Sarah to have sex with him, which is also betraying Sarah in the room.
Right.
So he knows what consent is. Like, he knows what consent is, because at the party that Nancy shows up to hunt him down, he says no to her.
Yeah.
They've had sex before, seemingly quite a bit. There's an like a little bit of that is unfolded there between them in the conversation in the bedroom with a fully lit fire. Again, American households
I
and
know,
cinema.
right? What?
Unbelievable scenes. And he's like, no, like really up alert, like absolutely not. And she's like, I think you'll find yes. And she does the
What if I
glamour
looked
moment
like
and turns into
this?
Sarah. And then he's like, oh my God, yes. And that is like, he knows how consent works. He knows what fucking no means. Even in his glamored state, he understands the boundaries.
He's drunk, but not drunk enough to be like, you were a different person a moment ago. Like,
Yeah.
come on,
Yeah.
man.
Come on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And she, when the girls show up to stop Nancy, she's like, absolutely not. He calls everyone a whore. He's the whore.
Oh, it's
And
brilliant. Yeah.
And she says he's got to pay. He's sorry.
And she's full goth and she's laughing in his face. She skirts across the room on the tips of her toes. Like her outfit is fantastic. She's really intense, really, really frightening. And like her face in this scene is just amazing. Like her mouth is amazing. She's just incredible to behold.
Well, you get so much the sense in this scene that she's pushing back against the Catholic school upbringing. She's pushing it back against her abusive stepfather. She's pushing it back against being poor. Like it's all the rage that she has in her. And it's like so unfocused that it goes haywire and she pushes him out the window.
Yeah. She
psychically, magically.
She levitates his ass out the window and kills him. So this is kind of this is end of Act 2. So Act 3 is where shit's gonna really hit the fan because it begins with Sarah doing by herself a binding spell
with the white ribbon.
With the white ribbon that she bought from the Hallmark store. That's like to prevent
took off a shoebox.
Nancy is to prevent Nancy from doing harm to herself and others. But it's the next day. She knows something's up and she's in the school and she ducks into the bathroom to hide. And those three girls find her. This is a scary scene.
Yeah,
right? It gets to the heart of bullies are scary, but what's scarier is when you have pissed off your whole friend group and they hate you.
Yeah.
And that's frightening. And basically Nancy's like, hey, if you want to leave the circle, maybe also leave the school. The other girls are like, or the city, or just the planet entirely. Yeah. And Nancy says, don't do any more spells on me.
It's every line in this is so weighted in a way that it's like throwing a mine, like it's like walking through a minefield for her. Like she's trying to put on the face of what? Nothing's wrong, everything's fine. And they're like, really? Nothing? How are you sleeping, Nancy?
Like that violation comes from it's an interior violation as well, right? That like it's a very that's the thing about losing friends and like friendships dissolving, especially among girls, and arguably also among women, is that you're known intimately by the people who now have decided they hate you. You're known deeply, so they know how to hurt you, they know how to frighten you and to cause fear, and they also know how to get you to want to leave school, the town, the country. That's why it's scary, because we've seen them having these lovely times together, this light as a feather, stiff as a board, watching Bewitched, watching Wheel of Fortune, hanging around, smoking joints. They're friends outside of their ceremonies and outside of their ritual. The film does a great job of showing you the gradients and closeness of their friendship as it evolves over time, so that when that bathroom lock unslides unprompted in front of her face and the girls are towering over her, her costume has changed at this point as well. She's gone back to kind of wearing white and she's out of the goth accoutrement, the sort of Hot Topic realness that I wouldn't even, actually that's not fair, because it's way cooler than Hot Topic shit that they're all wearing. Like she has sort of normoed out a little bit in response. Like it's
and
such
they've gone darker.
And they've gone way slicker.
And like whereas like before they would have like the white undershirts, now they're full black.
Yeah, I feel like Rochelle's wearing a harness at some point. Like it's all really overtly goth. And poor fucking Sarah.
Yeah.
That's a shit place to be.
Her dad, there's a moment where there's one moment. Okay, so we've talked a lot about like where are the parents. She does have a moment with her dad here, in which it's after the funeral, and it's this idea of like, oh my gosh, the cops are asking everybody, and we have listen, we know what we did, or we know what you did, girl. But Nancy can't even begin to explain that to her father
Yeah.
And so she just says, don't touch me. I don't want anyone to touch me, which is like the feeling of being cursed is don't touch me. Everything I touch turns to shit. I love you. I must go away. And like when you lose your friend circle, when you feel cursed, when you feel like you're in deep depression, in a rut, like that's what that feels like. That to me is the like, I can see you wanting to help me, but the best help you can give me is not being here. And whether that's true or not, but that's how it feels in the moment. So I think that is a really relatable thing.
It's definitely also in that realm of people not being, especially young people, not being able to communicate with their parents. But you know, this movie doesn't necessarily go in this direction, but it could when we learn in the next scene at the magic shop, at the witch shop, that that her mother was a witch.
Yeah.
And so dad might actually know something about this, but
right.
that
Can you
doesn't,
imagine if she had asked her, she'd be like, hey, Dad, okay, so I manifested a snake in, you know, that snake that we keep finding snakes everywhere? I think that's me. And come on, if he's your dad, like, chances are your dad might actually
might
be like, oh yeah, your mom used to do shit like that all the time.
I do,
you know?
I do sort of appreciate though that this movie doesn't go with the parents thread. I think it can, but I don't think it has to, because I think it's perfectly natural for a 16-year-old or whatever just to be
figure
like,
it out on her own.
Just don't touch, leave me alone, Dad.
Yeah.
And,
I'll figure this out. This is my
we'll
mess.
save
I'll
that for
figure it
Pixar to have dad come through. But this isn't Pixar, and this is about these girls solving their problems.
Yeah.
But she does go to Lirio. So she does go to witch shop owner, who says, listen, you've got your mother's light in you. You've got a lot of light in you, a lot of natural witch powers. And I think the only way is that you have to surrender yourself to the higher power to defeat the others. So you have to invoke the spirit.
Like,
but
they called down Manon, you got to do the same. If you're you got to fight magic with magic,
and
on
it's
equal
not
footing.
And she makes clear, which I love this, she makes clear Manon is not the evil force. It's not Manon that entered your friend's body and now she's acting out evil. It is your friend took Manon to a dark place. Manon is neither good nor evil. It is what you make of it. And your friend made it fucking dark. You can make it fucking light. But
there's a whole lot of battle magic to get through before that.
Yeah, she doesn't make it through this. She just gets overwhelmed by the whole ceremony here and runs home. And at home, God, this is mean. We will, we will learn later that this was all faked, obviously, but she gets home. Her parents are gone. She gets a phone call from Nancy saying, like, I'm really sorry. Your parents thought you ran away and they flew back home. And she sees like the flight number.
There's been an accident.
It's all over the news. You should turn on the
died
TV.
in a plane crash.
Oh.
And then this house starts crawling with lizards, cool. Rats, cool. Worms, spiders, nope. Snakes, hell yeah. And scorpions, nope.
Scorpions, nope.
It is
cockroaches, nope.
Oh, the cockroaches. Oh.
Too many boys with too many legs. Did not go to school for insects, but I don't want to fucking deal with any of those.
I was gonna say, everybody's either got too many legs or not enough legs.
Or no legs. No legs at all.
You just move wrong. You're just not moving in a way that I like.
You know, actually, Sarah, I'm reminded the last time, I think it was one of the last times he came on the show. What did we watch? The Beyond, the Lucio Fulci, in which inexplicable tarantulas just started popping out of people's faces.
Like little kittens, though. They were fine. They were very little muppety fellas.
They were little
very
muppety.
Gentle. Hello, being but benignly smooching you to death. Absolutely fine. These
this is the opposite.
Textured.
This is like, it seems right and like they're all real. And they're in such quantities, and it's in such quantity, and they don't seem like Italian, like it's just out of nowhere, like the Italian filmmakers are like, I don't know, throw some scorpions on them. Yeah, sure, why not?
This is their house now. This is Snake House. This is Cockroach House. This is their place, and you have no place here. There's so many of them, and I think there's that excess is that the fear comes from, these tangles, like rat kings, there's just these masses and masses, like a toilet bowl overflowing with maggots. Like they really go there to bring you into the place of fear that
get out
of
you don't There's nowhere to escape.
And because those are real insects, because that is
Yeah.
practical effects, there's like they're falling out of grates, they're behind the radiators, they're everywhere. Like if that was CGI, I wouldn't want to get kind of sick. I would know. I'm like so on my CGI rock. But because they really did ram that set full of creepy crawlies, it has a very powerful effect. The light, it's very dark. There's a lovely like cast of light across Sarah's face at some point while she's sort of trying to escape. It's very upsetting. It's really gross.
Well, she finally gets cornered in the bathroom, and then suddenly Nancy shows up, and all of the creepy crawlies are gone. Nancy's like, gotcha. And she's gone full evil here because she's basically like, you know what? You know, if I were as big a loser as you, I would totally kill myself, and you will. You're gonna kill yourself tonight. You know, you've already killed Chris, and you killed your mom when you were coming out of her. That was the biggest thing. Like, just the cruelest shit she can say to Sarah here.
Yeah.
Awful.
And the other girl, Rochelle and Bonnie, are there too. And as they're like towering over her,
they're levitating. They're up by the ceiling.
Levitating.
I know.
Yeah.
Light as a feather. And they Nancy pulls out that dagger and cuts both of Sarah's wrists, who then has to run upstairs and find something, antiseptic and bandages, whatever she can get a hold of. There's a long pause here where Sarah is upstairs, like bandaging, taking care. She's bleeding out.
Well, she starts calling the corners by herself.
She's praying.
She starts invoking. She starts invoking Manon as this is happening. And Nancy tells Rochelle and Bonnie, get your dumbasses up there and find out. This gets a little too evil henchman-y for me.
It's so crony.
Right.
Like, get up there, crony.
So this is interesting because in the race car, in the red car sequence, at a certain point, Sarah is like being like, Bonnie, you're being a fucking dick, you know, and Rochelle, I don't even know what your deal is.
Yeah.
And then she says to Nancy, you are being reckless. And she turns back to the girls, what do you guys think? And Nancy goes, they don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Those two.
They do what
in
they're
a kind
told.
of a, they're not people. I think she almost says something like that. She's like, they don't think, you know? And this is where, unfortunately, rather than subverting Nancy's command, that was just some light foreshadowing, where those girls actually do just become Flotsam and Jetsam. They just are
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to
little bitches doing what they're told. And their ending is the end that they meet here is quite unsatisfying, I think. Yeah.
Well, they go and check on, see if Sarah's dead yet. And when they get up there, Sarah basically distracts them with a mirror, and they both see themselves in what they see are the worst forms of themselves, or their biggest fears of themselves. And so, you know, Rochelle sees a version of herself with all of her hair coming out, just like Laura had. And Bonnie sees her, like, her burn scars covering her whole fucking face. She's very Freddy Krueger at this point looking. And they both basically scream and say, fuck this, and run out of the house, leaving Nancy.
Even though theoretically they would look at each other and be like, you're fine, but neither here nor there.
It's a little unsatisfying.
It actually kind of in this last sequence, the use of mirrors is really important as like a theme, which, especially if we're going to talk about teenage girls, the mirror, like I just kept being reminded of like Aaron McGeown's song Mirrors Break Back, and the idea of like, what are you supposed to do when you're surrounded by these images of your, like, everybody's like, it's what's inside that's important. And yet the way everyone behaves in this mirror world that we live in which everyone's mirror conscious, like that, like, and it really is interesting how it's their fear of, like, they're not going to do good. They're not scared straight. They're scared of their worst fears coming back to haunt them. Like, it's classic bad guy behavior, you know. And it's Nancy gets pushed into a fucking mirror until it breaks, like, and Sarah hides in a mirror. Like Sarah's the only one who's like, I'm cool. I can come and go. I like where I'm at. Yeah, like, my body's all right. Into the mirror I go. Out of it.
Rochelle has an interaction with a mirror early as well, when she sees Laura on the floor of the changing rooms, and she's standing beside a mirror, and her shadow, or her reflection moves a fraction of a second
and looks in the same direction as her, like,
but just is off.
Yeah, that's right. I'd forgotten about that scene. Yes, absolutely.
So the idea of like this is the thing that, like, the magic you didn't get what you got what you wanted, but not what you needed
Mm.
from magic, because you asked for the wrong fucking thing. Like, you don't need to be filled with power and have nowhere to put, like, what are you going to do with that power? Just be
Yeah.
like, you're going to get bored of being all powerful in 2 days. And that's why she takes it to a dark place. But the idea
Or
of, like,
someone's going to realize you're out here murdering people very
Yeah.
casually. Like,
like, what do you actually
Very
want?
casually.
Like, what do you want is such a huge, like, that's the overwhelming question of, like, why pick up magic, not just to tinker around with it, but like, what do you want to do? What do you want to put into the world that is safe, that is good?
And I think Nancy wants power in a way that is amorphous and interesting, because for a little while, I think what Nancy wants, because her I want is really kind of different, because we don't really have an end game for her.
Yeah.
And I think there was a sort of a secret Bechdel test failure happening a little bit for a while, and that what Nancy's dialogue is very interesting, because while she's very effusive towards Sarah at times, she's also kind of a bitch to her as well. Like, she does exhibit jealousy towards her, obviously, because she has this thing going with Chris.
Yeah.
So, and this
She's also rich. She's also a rich girl
now, you know. Yeah, she comes in, she's rich, like, she's got like a sort of an edge and a togetherness. She's quite preppy when she first arrives that Nancy lacks. And like, Nancy's sort of the most powerful that we see her up till this point during the fight sequence is when she is glamoring Chris, you know. So I think Chris is sort of the pawn that is being moved around here a little bit, you know, or the tennis ball between these two people. And when he is out of the picture, murdered, I don't know, is Nancy grieving him? I don't know. Nancy's game is off here. I don't know what she wants during this whole thing. I don't know what she wants.
Yeah.
I think
you got your house in the sky. You got your mom, who
Your
is
shitty
now
stepdad is gone, you know.
She stepdad, like, you got, like, didn't you get what you want? And that's,
I don't
rough.
think this movie is really taking on cultural biases yet, right? Like, it's not interested in that. It's sort of actually is much more of the mindset. It's a little, is it Calvinist? What is it? I don't know. It's something a little bit more like,
do good to get into heaven. Don't ask why it's good. Yeah.
Right. You do. And also, you are there to make the choices. Only you can make the choices. Nothing else can affect the choices. So Nancy is crazy. So Nancy Manon does not take over Nancy's body and make her do evil things. She acquires an AR-15 of magic and uses it terribly. And so this movie is concerned with that. Well, one of the problems there, though, is it doesn't really suppose, like, how victimhood can arise, right? Like, Bonnie is, we can sit there and say, like, oh, Neve Campbell, I love that Neve Campbell's like, I'm not beautiful.
Yeah.
But at the heart of it is she went through some severe accident that burned 2/3 of
when
her
she was
body
young.
when she was young.
The only treatment is extremely painful.
And Rochelle is the victim of constant racial epithets and abuse by not just Laura, but probably through her whole life. So where does that land them? And so it does, there is a little bit of a conservative bootstrap concept here, whereas Sarah has survived some traumas in her life, but she has made the choice to be balanced. She has made the choice to be happy.
Have you tried just not being mentally ill, Nancy?
I know. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
So this movie does not factor those things in. It kind of lets us know in the end, Sarah probably should have the power because nobody else can really handle it correctly. I'm like, what if nobody had this power?
I know, right? What if there's no kings? What if there's no queens? What if you should, you know, like
I'm not rooting for either of these bitches. Like, I'm really not. Like, I'm not rooting for either of them in the end. Like, there's a great scuffle, loads of elemental shit happening. Like, you know,
I love the drawers. Well, listen, there's nothing I love more than a wizard fight. You know, like like in any shape and form. And it is the idea of, like, when you can manipulate all the objects around you, how do you fight someone? And now they're on equal footing. But it's not like Transformers level of just like watching an iPhone in a blender. Like Superman versus Zod. Like, it's not just an unstoppable force. Like, we know there's going to be a victor.
Two teenage girls kick the shit out of each other in a fancy house.
In a fancy house, just trashing the place.
We have Chekhov's expensive, fancy little knife that appears at one point again. Well, we see it, and it's the one they use to swear allegiance to each other. Is the very one that Nancy wants to drive through. Sarah, well, she becomes kind of briefly invisible, which is kind of cool. A little bit of early CGI there, not too annoying, very nice. And They just scream at each other, and Sarah kicks her into a mirror, and then they are done. Like, it's a really chaotic sequence. It's very messy. Nobody
blood.
here comes out well. No blood.
No blood. There's no blood in this
No.
film.
Mm-mm.
There's really, like, with the exception of like the slight dripping of blood with the wrists.
Yeah.
And the
It's-
pinprick on the finger.
and
It's
the pinprick-
not it's not violence. It's much scufflier,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
than that.
Apparently they were going for a PG-13 rating, but they said at the fundamental heart, because it was about women, young teenage girls doing witchcraft, it had to get an R rating.
All of the
Wow.
Hays
So
Code.
fundamentally-
Yeah, that's what the Hays
Unbelievable.
Code is for. Yeah, that's
Fundamentally.
hilarious. Jesus.
Unreal.
There is that, like, this is going to be a PG-13, but we can't just put candles and crystals in the hands of children these days, because that makes an R rating.
We've talked about on the show, the very first PG-13 movie is Red Dawn, which is about teenage boys taking up arms.
Yep.
But
to
when it's
fight.
girls,
But when
like,
it's girls
it's girls
taking up
doing
magic implements
No.
like brooms and
R.
white sage, they're like, no. 18
and
or
like
over,
giving
please.
each other gentle little kisses and promising friendship to each other. Oh heavens!
Oh, dear.
Heavens! No. There is some
What?
really good dialogue in this whole bit as well.
there is.
That like Nancy pretends to apologize at one point before the fucking.
Like, she thinks she might have the upper hand.
And she says, "I know I'm a little crazy. I don't mean to be." And for a minute, I think she's kind of human in that moment.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh
Yeah.
fuck, poor
Yeah.
Nancy.
Yeah.
And that's the real burden of being a teenage girl, I think, that we get to see in that instance. And having to both having to be that way and also having to deal with people who are that way, who will apologize to you in 1 second and then try and put a knife through you in the next, but also to be perceived as crazy and to have your emotions be something that are feel slightly out of your control. And like, there is, I think, something good happening here, but it's so cluttered by this fight sequence that is not. I don't know. And she says as well at one point, she says, "Relax, it's only magic," which I think is lovely dialogue as well.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think these are
yeah.
like, Sarah, you're just picking up on the gems that, like, is why this movie is still good.
Yeah, that's why it lasts.
Years later. Like, you might not, like, maybe you get it all in the first watch, maybe you don't, but it bears rewatching over and over and over again because of things like that.
Let's talk about the epilogue, which is basically all resolved. It looks like
it's a nice, bright, sunny LA day.
And Bonnie and Rochelle show up at Sarah's house, and we see Sarah's dad in the background, so we know that he didn't actually die in a plane crash. And Bonnie and Rochelle show up to say, like, totally sorry. Also, that plane crash thing, that was just a glamour. It's just a practical joke. Ha ha ha. Hey, our powers don't work anymore. Do yours? Do you want to hang out? She says,
just call the corners for old time's sake.
And she says, hold your breath until I call you. And then they basically like storm away, and Rochelle's like, she probably doesn't have any powers anyway. And then she does, because she uses lightning to zap a tree branch to fall right next to them.
Yeah.
And then Nancy is in a mental institute.
Yeah.
Straitjacket tied to a bed, all white. Nurse comes in to give her an injection.
She's Marlon Brando. She is like Marlon Brando level of unhinged in this last sequence.
I can fly. I'm flying. I'm flying. I'm flying.
And there's scratches all over her face.
Oh my god, the makeup is like perfect. It's like she's crying 1 minute, she's elated it's pure mania. It's pure mania, which
is very scary.
Yeah.
But like, that's another thing that happens to teenage girls as well, is that like, you go through things when you're a teenage girl, and in these sort of folie à deux or folie à quatre, these sort of mad circles of friendship that you get into, that you can't really describe to anybody else that are outside of it, and leave you changed, and leave you feeling crazy, and leave you unhinged for a while and hurt, and they don't make sense to anybody else who is outside of it. Do you know? So in this case, it's just magic that she is talking. She uses like the story, the narrative allegory here is that it's magic, but the wider impact is that, like, I don't know, she has no language to explain what she's gone through, and everyone thought she was crazy before anyway. So
she
ends up
now.
imprisoned. Yeah, she's crazy now.
Shall we rate this movie?
Yes, let's.
How approachable is this if you're horror film averse? So we got our Sasha scale, our squeamish approachability scale for the horror averse, where 1 is do not approach and 10 being super approachable. I would give The Craft like 8 black candles out of 10. it's like it's more like what you're talking about. It's more like teen drama heightened with witchcraft than it is like all of the trappings of a horror film. There are but content warnings. So there's attempts at date rape, there's domestic abuse, racist and sexist bullying, not to mention the suicide attempts. But the blood and gore are minimal. And the jump scares are minimal too. I would say like the biggest, like most disturbing horror element is the creepy crawlies, like all the snakes and spiders and shit in that final act. That scene it's very squirm worthy. So yeah, I would give this 8 out of 10. I think it's super approachable. Even if you are horror squeamish, just note that the squirmy things are going to happen. Cecil, what about you as a horror film?
The canon of horror films, I'm going to take that. I'm going to add an extra candle to that, add an extra candle to your 8 and make it a 9. I had not seen this movie in over 5 years. So it's been a minute, but not too long. It's entertaining from frame one. Like it is, and especially coming off of some like really lamely paced horror films in the past few rolls, I was like, yes, this is a movie. This is it is so professional. I've seen this movie upwards of 10 times, and I find a little something, like a little gem in it, like the way a line is read every single time.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, what about you? Do you have anything you want to rate this movie on?
For I want to say that I would give this sort of in terms of like the loving, warm, cozy nature of teenage witchery, and it's a really good story about growing up, like a Bildungsroman. I would give it the really high solid rating of 72 tarot cards out of 72. Like, sorry.
Nice. The full deck.
Sorry, 78 tarot cards
Yep.
out of 78. Like, I will give it the full major and the full minor. I think it's a really, outside of being a horror film, I think it's also a really gorgeous, nuanced story, while dated at times in ways that are worth thinking about and worth using as reflections for how we live today. I do think it's also a really great story about growing up and being a girlhood. It also asks us, I would also give it like 0 cops out of 10, because it's also a story about who holds power and who doesn't. Yeah. So 0 cops and 78 tarot cards are my 2 ratings for this story in terms of it being a story about growing up and being a witch.
Let's figure out what movie we will watch next. Cecil, you've got a scare die, I've got a style die. We'll roll them, match them up, see what movie fits. If you roll a 1, Cecil, our next movie scare is existential. 2, Alien. 3, A Lady Killer. 4, Tiny Blank, which I think was on this list the last time you were on the show, Sarah. 5,
it's been on there forever.
5, Evil Science, or 6, Zombie. What is our scare?
That's a 4.
We did it.
Tiny Blank.
Tiny Blank. At
finally.
Long last.
It's fun.
Okay, so we're gonna match that up with the style that I roll. So if I roll a 1, our next movie's got to be found footage. 2, action fantasy, something that skirts horror a little bit. 3, a 1970s movie. 4, it's got to be a period piece. 5, something from the last 5 years. Or 6, it is Euro horror, a European horror movie with Tiny Blank. Let's see what I roll. That is also a 4, a period piece with Tiny Blank.
Oh my!
That's fun.
Okay, so we'll start, Sarah, if you can think through anything that you think might match this. We'll talk about ones that Cecil and I wrote down, and also I'll pull up what people on Letterboxd were saying, too. A couple of ones. So Tiny Blank is interesting because I think the spirit of it is bugs or slither or something like that. Yeah. But maybe it's children. So I put
children are just tiny humans.
That's right. I put a couple of good ghosty period pieces. The Others,
yes,
that's children, and that is a period piece.
Yep.
The Orphanage is another period piece. This is a
similar,
Spanish language film. I can't remember. It's been too long. Are there tiny creatures in Pan's Labyrinth?
Yes. Because
there are horrible fairies.
Yes, there's many weird winged fairies in that one that appear as dragonflies.
God, I watched that again recently. It's perfect. It's so chilling. It's a masterpiece, and there are horrible fairies in it.
Yeah.
We also have on this list Annabelle, doll.
Dolls.
Dolls are small.
Yep.
Ooh,
And we also have the also another Guillermo del Toro is Devil's Backbone in there too.
cool.
Yep. Tiny
Um,
orphanage ghost kids.
I will tell you what Letterboxd gave us.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, Brave Crab. This might be my favorite just suggestion, even though I don't think we'll pick it.
This is brilliant. Brave Crab, this is brilliant. You are
Leprechaun
brilliant.
4 in space because it's set in 2096.
Yep.
Wow,
That's
that's
period pieces.
fantastic.
Why not?
I am Leprechaun averse, as you can imagine. However, I will make an exception for something.
Would you watch
like
Leprechaun 4?
I
in
would,
space?
yeah. I would, yeah. Like, absolutely, I would if he was in space now.
Well, similarly, now this is like, so we talk about tiny things. I was thinking Puppet Master. Now, Josh Ludd brings in Puppet Master 3, Toulon's Revenge. I want to check on the period piece ofness.
Yeah, the thought immediately on my first on this, and I don't know if you guys have done it. I should double check this. Have you done Mulholland Drive?
We
Ooh,
haven't. I would love
we've
to do
not.
There are
Mulholland Drive.
tiny people. There are tiny people.
tiny
But
little
it's
blue
not
box.
At a very
period.
important time. It's not a period piece.
It takes
You couldn't
place in the
really
time
say that
it's-
it does. It's too modern, but it does count under, I think, tiny people because one
Okay,
of the
now-
finest scares in the film is tiny people.
I can verify, Josh Ludd, you're on track. This film is set in 1941, World War II Berlin, and it's how the blah, 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 and then plot. So correct. I think that's another
Nice.
contender.
There's also a thing too where like the original Puppet Master has this is like Kronos is like this too. I think I thought put Kronos on period piece for like Evil Signs or whatever, but it has a prologue to the movie that sets
like
up a
olden
thing
times.
that happened in olden times, and then the rest of the movie takes place today. Might be a little bit of a cheat. Paul Richards, It Chapter 1.
Oh, that's a period piece.
Yeah,
definitely
a period piece.
Clowns and balloons, those are tiny things, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Children.
Yeah,
Children are tiny. And then Paul Richards also points out Blade the Iron Cross. That's from 2020. Do we know what Blade the Iron Cross is? Is that a new Blade movie?
A 1945 psychic war journalist gains telekinetic link to murderous puppets and uses it. Oh, so I think this is like
Psychic war journalist.
Yeah. To sabotage
Dream career.
Dress for the job you want,
sabotage a
Sarah.
top secret Nazi experiment that involves using a death ray to transform people into zombies. This sounds unhinged.
Like a
I
lark.
might have to draw the line in the
lark.
sand. The line of the sand ends after Puppet Master 3, Toulon's Revenge, and Leprechaun 4. I think out of those, it's just so funny. Like I feel like we should flip a coin between Leprechaun 4 and Puppet Master 3.
You don't want to hit up Pan's Labyrinth, like to try and keep going with our like.
Okay, so Pan's Labyrinth, amazing. The others, amazing. Like we've got some Annabelle, very good. Like we've got. We should either go good film, bad film, like and pick a road.
Is there a road that you can go down with Pan's Labyrinth that you could see it again, or is it? I've said this the last time. Is this such a niche combo that you'll never get a chance to do one of these weird ass like
all of these
B2C movies?
Yeah, I know, right?
But you would definitely get a chance to do Pan. As much as I'm like, I love Pan's Labyrinth. I think it's exquisite. I would walk after Guillermo del Toro anywhere. And I think you will get the chance to do it again. Though.
Yeah,
I think all of these are ones that we could do again because Leprechaun 4.
That's true.
Because we
do sequels all the time.
We do in space. We do sequels. We
mythology,
do
mythological.
Dumb. Yeah.
I don't know. It is kind of funny just that it's so deep in it's two different franchises that are not great to begin with. That like
Puppet Master and Leprechaun.
That is I don't know. It's kind of appealing to the John Waters in me. I'm like, yes, we could watch Nicole Kidman, Oscar award-winning actress, in a tightly scripted, very haunting ghost story, or we could watch Leprechaun 4, Leprechaun in Space.
Can I propose an idea for how we pick this
Please
movie?
do.
I like your coin flip idea. And then can I ask you, Sarah, to pick the two movies that are each side of the coin?
It's always
Oh.
great having a guest. Come on, Sarah.
We'll do.
Well, because we got to the craft from Symphony. She was like, you got to pick the craft, and we did. So I love putting in the hands of the
Let's do a serious
guest.
one on one side and a dumb one on the other. How about that?
Okay.
You're such a balanced witch.
Okay,
I
so
know. a natural witch.
You're a natural witch.
I'm gonna say heads is the side with the star on it. So what is our heads, Sarah?
So for the star, I think I should accurately stand by the folk magic of my people and suggest the leprechaun leprechaun 4.
And then tails.
Pan's Labyrinth.
Tails is Pan's Labyrinth. Heads is Leprechaun 4 in space. All right, here we go. Heads, Leprechaun 4 in space. Tails, Pan's Labyrinth. That is a heads, my friend. We got Leprechaun 4 in space.
Oh my God, here we go.
Has there ever been an Irish person in space? I feel like one astronaut at least has been an Irish person in space. I'm very excited to see what this text does with my people's
I like that
journeys.
you called it a text.
It's a text.
It's very polite of me, wasn't
Has it been written down? We don't know.
Oh my God.
Oh man, you guys, thank you all for listening. Thank you, Cecil, for talking with me. Thank you, fantastic guest, Sarah Griffin. Sarah, where can people find you and your work in this world?
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It's been an absolute joy as usual. If you'd like to find me, I'm still on the sinking ship of twitter.com @Griffsky. My Instagram is @SarahGriffsky. I have a newsletter called Griff Notes, which is griffnotes.ghost.io. And my book, Spare and Found Parts and Other Words for Smoke, can be found in all bookstores everywhere. And I will have more news regarding further fiction projects very soon. So that's what's
And
going
also
on.
thank you to Brave Crab for the movie suggestion on our Letterboxd. If you all have thoughts on The Craft or ideas for other movies that would have been good tiny blank meets period piece, let us know on Twitter or Instagram @randomhorror9 and watch Leprechaun 4 in space with us this week. And come on back next Tuesday for a new episode. Have a restful night with no random dudes on the street trying to give you a snake or nothing. Boo!
Boo.